everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight or for watching us live on YouTube. I just have a few technical notes before we get started for the people who are joining us here in the meeting. We are joined tonight by our ASL interpreters, Jim and Heather, and they should be visible throughout the duration of this presentation. If you do need interpretation services, you can hover over their names, click on the 3 dots next to their names and pin them as they start signing. If for some reason they are not visible to you at any point during the presentation, a recording of this video with the interpreter visible at all times will be made available on YouTube shortly after this presentation. For everyone, we will be taking questions at the end of tonight's presentation. And so to ask a question, you need to either raise your hand or use the Q&A feature at the bar along the bottom of your Zoom screen. So to raise your hand, you just click the raise hand function in the webinar controls. It looks like a hand. We will call on you to speak. You'll be unmuted. You can ask your question, and then the panelists will answer. Or if you prefer to use the Q&A feature, same thing. You open the Q&A window at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You type your question into the Q&A box and click send. You can also send that question anonymously. The panelists will be notified that your question has been asked and will either respond via text for everybody to see, or more likely, the panelists will respond out loud so everybody can hear the answer to your question. We will attempt to answer all questions that come through, either via raised hands or the Q&A function tonight. If questions are duplicates, we'll probably lump them together, but we'll try to answer everything. Again, thank you for coming, and I'm going to kick it over to our host, Dave Hutchinson.
Hello, good evening. My name is David Hutchinson. I'm the Assistant Director for Capital and Asset Management in the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget for the City of Pittsburgh. You're attending our third of 3 meetings for the 2022 capital budget. Tonight, we're going to talk about some really interesting projects related to economic development and some of the work you may be seeing out in the community. If you've been to our meetings before, maybe to an in-person meeting, I miss them a lot. I miss Brogies, I miss meeting new people, I miss sitting at a table and hearing about different neighborhoods. But last year we were able to move digitally and still engage with the capital budget process, and the public, thanks in large part to the City Channel team. They helped us out a lot, stay engaged. So this year we're kind of doing a similar format. We're going to do 3 separate meetings with deep dives. We had a great meeting last week on transportation projects. We've also done a meeting on kind of park assets, playgrounds, those sort of things as well. And then tonight we're going to talk about economic development. Just want to do a quick check to make sure everybody can get to the meeting okay. Any accessibility issues, just want to give some time for that. Okay, so we have a packed agenda tonight. We're going to be talking to a lot of experts in some really interesting fields here at the city. We're going to give a short presentation on what the capital budget is and how it's made. Then we're going to hear from Jan Hammond with the Commission on Human Relations. Winnie Finstrom from the Office of Management and Budget is going to talk about community development block grants and some of the work we do with HUD funds. We have a great team from the URA to present on some of their projects as well. Andrew Dash is here from City Planning, and Sarah Kinter, our Director of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections, is here to answer any questions you may have about land remediation. Also, we're going to have plenty of time at the end for any questions and answers. Again, we'll go through the instructions as Leah did when we get closer to that time. And then we're going to wrap up with some other opportunities for you to keep giving your input on the capital budget process, because this is really meant to be a kickoff of the whole season. So you may be wondering, what's the point of this meeting? What are we doing tonight? And what happens with the information that you share with us? These meetings are really important in a couple ways. One is it's a great way for us to teach you about the capital budget, the process of how it's made. But really, we want to get information from you to know what you want to see in the capital budget for 2022. We ask that in 2 ways, your participation. One is participating in this meeting. So if you have any questions for the expert panel, those are going to be recorded as part of this YouTube. We also send out notes with feedback to different departments of project ideas spring up that way. And then also at the end, we're going to ask you to fill out a survey. Maybe you already have. Maybe you've already been to our Engage PGH website and completed one. Thank you in advance if you have. But those are great for showing us exactly what you want or just kind of your larger priorities for the budget. We'll get into some more details on that in a little bit. Oh, sorry. So up next, I'm going to pass it to Brendan Katikia.
As David said, my name is Brendan Katikia. I am a senior analyst also in the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget. So setting the scene a little bit, every year the city adopts two incredibly important strategic planning documents. We have both an operating budget and a capital budget, which, as you might have guessed, is what we're talking about this evening. The operating budget is what pays for the city's personnel costs, daily operations to keep things running. This is where you would find things like employee salaries and benefits, where you would find things like office supplies. This is where we pay for pens. It does pay for things that are included in the capital budget, but in more of kind of a maintenance and upkeep capacity. The capital budget, on the other hand, is everything that the public interacts with. It is the built environment. So it's bridges, streets, parks, playgrounds, essentially anything that has a roof. So that includes all of our facilities that we perform operations out of. Broadly speaking, the capital budget is used to pay for large, expensive improvements, significant improvements to city-owned assets or acquisitions of new assets. So you might think of the distinction between these two documents as being, the operating budget is more like getting an oil change. The capital budget is if you have to replace your transmission. And then for 2021, these are both of these documents, which you can find on the OMB page or the Council Budget Office page on the City of Pittsburgh website. So the capital budget is part of a larger plan, which is the capital improvement plan. It's a 6-year program that's adopted every year as part of the capital budgeting process. So as I've mentioned, capital projects are large improvements that cost millions of dollars, and they often take years to complete. Everything from the initial planning all the way through construction, and then ultimately project closeout. So even as I mentioned that it's part of a multi-year plan, it's important to note that for this process, for the annual budgeting process, we're only actually legally adopting the next year's budget. But again, because these are multi-year projects, we want to be able to anticipate what our needs are for the next 5 years after that next year. So this year we're having a series of meetings discussing the 2022 capital project. And if you take a look at this green shaded row, the third down here, this is from the 2021 capital budget, what we had anticipated looking at going into next year. So part of this process is we're going to look at proposals for next year. We're going to refine what our needs are for projects that are ongoing. And then that process continues into next year and the year after. It's constantly ongoing. If you're navigating from left to right here, these are the fund sources that comprise the capital budget. So on the furthest left here is CDBG. This is the Community Development Block Grant. This is a program that is funded by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development that we receive annually. To the right is a column, the header of bond. This is municipal bonds. This is borrowed money that the city uses to finance large infrastructure improvement projects. One column to the right of that is PAYGO. This is short for Pay As You Go. This is money that is transferred over to the capital budget from the operating budget. It's our own money that we are making available for capital projects. And then one to the right is other, which is essentially just a catch-all. That's everything else that doesn't fit into these other buckets. So that is largely money that the city receives from the Federal Highway Administration to support large transportation and large infrastructure improvement projects. That's maybe state or county grants that the city pursues and is awarded. That's anything else that does not fit into these other categories. The capital budget process takes about 3/4 of the year. So about 3/4 of any given year, we are spending developing what the next year's plan is. It starts each year in April when the mayor announces the priorities for the next year's capital budget. Those priorities are on a future slide, so we'll get to those in a moment here. Those are thematic thematic priorities rather than specific proposals for projects. It's the mayor kind of informing the guiding principles for what should be adopted into the next year's budget. In May, the Office of Management and Budget issues a request for proposals to City Pittsburgh departments, city authorities, and then also external organizations that the city has partnered with in the past on implementing capital projects. So that request for proposals is open for a few months. And then during that time, as the proposals are being developed, we hold this series of capital budget public hearings that you're attending right now. On July 1st of each year, the deadline for those proposals occurs, and then throughout the summer, the Capital Program Facilitation Committee, which is the CPFC acronym on the next line here, meets with those departments, authorities to discuss every proposal that was received on July 1st, or by July 1st, rather. So that committee is made up of representatives of the administration, that's the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget, City Council, the Council's Budget Office, and the City Controller's Office. And then towards the end of the summer, after all of the series of meetings has occurred to actually get into the details of those proposals, the CPFC scores everything. Everything is evaluated, and a summary report is compiled and presented to the mayor. And that report is sort of the foundation for what goes into the next year's document, for the next year's capital budget. That's followed by, on September 30th of each year, the mayor proposes a preliminary budget. This was actually something that started when the city was under Act 11. That's a State Act 11 of 2004. That now that we're no longer in Act 11, we've kept this practice where there's a September budget, which is kind of the first stake in the ground for what things are looking like for the next year. So that is presented on September 30th of each year. Following that, that document is refined, and then the mayor presents a formal mayor's budget in November, and that is part of a State of the City address that occurs. So at that point, then things are handed off to City Council to deliberate, amend the budget. And it's important to note here too, at this stage of the process, the opportunity for public input is not over with these meetings. These council meetings that occur throughout November and December, when City Council is meeting with city departments and authorities to go over what will be included in the next year's budget, those are open to the public for attendance. They're open to the public for comment. So please be aware of that later on this year. So as I mentioned earlier, this slide shows what the mayor's priorities are for the 2022 capital budget. Important to note as well that these are not listed in any particular order. It is just how I was able to sort of Tetris them into the slide here. And also, as I mentioned, these are really meant to be overarching and thematic. They're meant to inspire departments to consider, when they're preparing a proposal, how does it fit within this set of priorities? And this slide here includes what the actual proposal form that is distributed looks like. So if you look at this little panel on the left here, where you can see a blank capital improvement plan, this is where we're trying to determine how much a project might cost. But as you can see, we're not only interested in what the cost is, we're interested in what the project is, we're interested in why we should undertake the project. We're also interested in what the operational impact of the project is. For example, if we were to acquire a new asset, we want to consider what sort of impact is that going to have in actually managing that day to day. Will we need to staff that? What sort of contracts will be needed to staff that? Individuals, what will it take to make sure that that asset is implemented? And then finally, this list here are the actual criteria that are used by the Capital Program Facilitation Committee to evaluate all of the proposals. These are also not listed in any particular order, but I want to note that these are all weighted differently. So a proposal that fits into this top criterion of public or employee safety or health is going to be weighted more strongly than the cost of actually undertaking that improvement. These criteria are all adopted in the city code. They're all very official. This is what drives the decision making for what is recommended as part of the report that is issued to the mayor's office during the summer at the end of the proposal stage of the capital budget adoption process.
Excellent.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you very much. That's really great detail. A lot of the documents related to last year's capital budget process, the development of the 2021 capital budget, can be found at the back of the budget as well. So executive summary from these meetings last year and how the different projects scored according to this criteria last year are appendices in the back of the capital budget for 2021. So up next, we're going to hear from Director Hammond from the Commission on Human Relations. I see they're already active in the chat, which I appreciate. Director Hammond, do you want to share your screen?
So I'll just introduce myself briefly. I'm Jam Hammond. I work for the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about the commission and what it is that we're doing here in this capital budget meeting. So the Commission on Human Relations is the City of Pittsburgh Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, which means that we enforce the anti-discrimination laws in the City of Pittsburgh for employment, housing, public accommodations, and the delivery of city services, or what we call, civil rights area of investigation. We investigate allegations of discrimination. We provide training and community education and the laws that govern civil rights here in Pittsburgh. So that means the Pittsburgh City Code, as well as the Civil Rights Act and the ADA. And we create, distribute educational materials that relate to civil rights. And we are empowered to conduct and support research and policy development in the areas of civil rights and discrimination in Pittsburgh. So to do exploratory research to find out what are our problems here as they relate to discrimination in Pittsburgh and to develop policies to address that. So why are we here in this discussion of city capital funds? It's because the Commission on Human Relations, PGHCHR, is a sub-grantee, I suppose, of the city, and we receive community development block grant funding to carry out parts of our mission, the parts of our mission that relate to fair housing. So we do this in education and outreach, in data analysis, policy development, and enforcement and mediation. So some of the things that we have done or are planning to do in education and outreach. So we have had a longstanding partnership with the Fair Housing Partnership of Greater Pittsburgh. The Fair Housing Partnership has for a long time used part of our CDBG allotment to carry out trainings and collaboration with the city. And it's only recently that we're expanding part of this so that we can look at more broadly, what does the city need in terms of fair housing collaboration? I'm gonna put myself on camera so you can see me. Some of the other stuff that we've done in education and outreach is that, of course, as I mentioned, we produce and distribute pamphlets, educational materials, things that we try to get to Pittsburghers so that they know what their rights are in fair housing, and so that they know how to contact us and what to do if they feel like they've been discriminated against in the area of housing. We also do outreach. We conduct community meetings. One of the more recent things that we've done is we've produced a couple of fair housing videos that you should see coming onto our social media soon, and they talk about different topics. We have one on redlining and its legacy here in Pittsburgh, and we have another one on disability and the fair housing implications of what a person with a disability experiences and why certain actions are illegal and what reasonable accommodations are. So we have a bunch of videos that are coming out soon, and that was funded through CDBG. We also do data analysis and policy development. So we have had a collaboration with the CMU Create Lab to create some stories in their platform called Earth Time to look at fair housing data over the years and what could be affecting the fair housing situation here in Pittsburgh. So you can find all of those collaborations at pgh.earthtime.com. and you can take a look, and they're interactive. You can look and see what are some of the trends that we've seen in fair housing as it relates to income, as it relates to race, as it relates to the city of Pittsburgh, and see some history about it. We have done and plan to do disparate impact research. When we talk about discrimination, we're talking about usually one of two different theories under which we consider discrimination. There's disparate treatment, where somebody is treating a person differently because of their protected class status, like their race or their sex or their sexual orientation, any of the protected classes. Or we talk about disparate impact, where somebody has a policy that, even though it seems neutral on its face, is having a different impact on a specific set of people within one protected class identity. That's a lot of the time what we're talking about with reasonable accommodations, where there's a policy that is okay for everybody else, but because of somebody's disability, they need a change to the policy. That's one example of disparate impact. Another example of disparate impact has to do with one of the regulations that HUD has given to us when it comes to criminal backgrounds and housing and how that should be considered. So just an example of what disparate impact is. So disparate impact research looks at what are policies across the board and how could they be affecting different protected class identities inside the city of Pittsburgh. Housing stability analysis. So these two bottom things are connected. And it is something that the commission was a part of going back a few years, but you'll hear this term, affirmatively furthering fair housing. This is a policy that is meant to look at what is beyond just looking at discrimination, looking at how can we push forward the future of what we see in housing and fair housing, and see how we can really deeply affect some of the history that's gone into the inequities in housing. So one of those things is housing stability analysis. This comes from the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Task Force recommendations. The commission helped to lead together a group of people who came up with 12 recommendations that were meant to affirmatively further fair housing in our city. And we're planning to use these recommendations in the future and see how we can pursue each one of them. These are things like, for example, one of the AFFH task force recommendations is to look at the possibility of good cause for eviction. Another one is something that is going forward now in Lawrenceville. Inclusionary zoning has been passed temporarily. Right now they're looking at getting it passed. So we're looking at having a staff person to really coordinate these efforts within the commission and look at how the commission can work together with other partners in the city and in the community to really push forward these 12 recommendations and see what can we accomplish in affirmatively furthering fair housing. So that's some of the things that we hope to have coming up for you. And enforcement. So in our partnership with the Fair Housing Partnership, we do a lot of outreach. We also partner with them on testing. What is testing? That's where a person were to, or rather, an organization sends two people of two different protected class identities to see if a housing provider treats them differently and then reports back. It's research to determine whether or not there's an unfair housing practice in the city. So we partner with the Fair Housing Partnership to work on that. And also mediation. So mediation that is by Just Mediation Pittsburgh has used a portion of what we have in our CDBG allotment to create this new organization that Just Mediation has become, and they provide they train mediators and they provide mediation services to landlords and tenants. So that's some of the stuff that we've done. We're continuing to work with Just Mediation. We're continuing to work on all of these things and try to bring some really new, interesting ideas into the fair housing space with CBDG funding. I think that might be it for me.
Yeah. Thank you very much. While Whitney gets their screen loaded with their slides, I just want to say there was a great question in the Q&A already about closing the gap on 20,000 affordable units that are needed in the city. I think some of the work that doesn't always get called out and celebrated the way it should is the prevention of that gap getting worse. And a lot of that work has to do with what Dr. Hammond and CHR do day to day, whether it's discrimination, remediation, counseling, or advising us on good ways to spend CDBG dollars to improve people's lives. It's always a nice kind of working relationship and ecosystem between a lot of the parties on this call, actually.
Yeah, I had meant, sorry, to actually specifically address that. So in terms of the 20,000 unit affordability gap, where there are people who can't find affordable housing in the city, some of the AFFH task force recommendations do specifically address, specifically, I think, just cause or good cause eviction. Another one that specifically addresses it is maximizing the use of housing vouchers, which are underutilized in our city, not for the tenants or renters lack of trying, but they are underutilized. And I think also inclusionary zoning addresses that affordability gap. It's still there, it's still a problem, but some of those AFFH task force recommendations, hopefully through collaboration and coordination, we can start to really address them. I think there are a lot of things the city has done recently to start on the right path to do it.
Yeah, I was in a meeting this morning with Lawrenceville community members who were discussing how since the inclusionary zoning pilot started, I think they've added 40 new units of affordable housing in the neighborhood. And before that, for the decade, I think they had 9 new units come online. So it's definitely, I think there's some great new tools available to us. I'm excited to see different departments using them. So up next, we're going to hear from within the Office of Management and Budget. We have a specific team that deals day to day with our HUD funded programs, which are community development block grants, emergency solutions grants, and housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. And so that's its own 11-person team that is run by Whitney Finstrom.
As David said, my name is Whitney Finstrom. I'm with the Office of Management and Budget Community Development Division. And we're fortunate to be able to be a part of all these different improvements throughout the city and to assist with the coronavirus funds as well. As David said, we're responsible for the administration of the city's federal housing and urban development funds, which include these 4 buckets that you see. The largest one is the CDBG funds. That's roughly in the $4 million range. Emergency Solutions Grant funds, roughly $1 million plus $2 million. HOPWA, which is Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, also roughly $1 million. And then the Home Investment Partnerships Program, which is the affordable housing funding stream that goes to the URA for housing programs. So as you can imagine, the nature of the funding, these funds are used to address the housing, economic, and human service needs of low to moderate income City of Pittsburgh residents and neighborhoods. So that's really the key part of this programs. So just to give you a big picture about the funding that's changed over the years, as you can see a arrow heading downwards. The City of Pittsburgh CDBG allocations have changed greatly since the 70s, as everything else has. That was kind of the peak in the late 70s. But anyway, it's dipped down to roughly in the $10 to $13 million range since probably the early 2000s. And you can see the little bump up just about a year ago. That's the coronavirus funds that came in. There were roughly $10 million of CDBG coronavirus funds that came into the city in 2 waves. So that's what that bump up at the arrow is. But likely it's going to fall back and has already to its normal funding pattern. Next slide. The key to the funding is it's supposed to meet a national objective. And there's 3 primary national objectives. I won't go into all the details, but there's LMI, low mod income, which is the primary funding stream for limited clientele persons that are most of our public service programs. There's slum and blight, that's demolition of dilapidated structures. An urgent need is a rarely used category. We used it for coronavirus, right? So it's for emergencies. Hurricane Katrina, that was another use of urgent need funds. Sorry, I have extra noise here. Thanks. All right, great. Next slide, please. So HUD annually comes out with income limits for the programs to make sure that persons who avail themselves of the program are qualified. And you have to be low to moderate income, or LMI. And this table is effective as of June 1st, 2021. So as you can see, for a household of one person, 17,850 is considered to be very low income. And then it scales up depending on the household size and the income level. But this is updated every year, and we base our programs on this table that is released from HUD. Next, please. So CDBG funds can be used for a wide range of activities. I won't go through every one of these, but just trust me in that there's wide use of ability to use wide use of these funds for economic development and housing. You can't build new housing, for instance, but you can use it for housing rehabilitation, public services, public improvements, park improvements and street improvements, sidewalks, and so on. Next slide, please. So as I said, with public service grants, you can use them for public services, childcare, health services, education programs, senior programs, programs for homeless persons, and recreation services. So, quite a wide range, though it looks like a lot of options, which there are some very stringent CDBG guidelines to using these funds. So you have to have income verification for persons using these services. So we have to work with organizations to make sure that they, qualify persons who avail themselves of the program actually qualify for the services. Next slide. The other economic development tool is the Neighborhood Economic Development, or NET as we call it, as people probably know it formerly as ACBO. And it's focused on residential commercial real estate development and to facilitate this development. For the last couple of years, last year and this year, there's been roughly 500,000 of CDBG funds set aside for that particular program. Next slide. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which I mentioned earlier, is the program which is focused on, this is through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is through the Treasury Department. This passed in December, January this past year during the worst of the COVID. And the basic premise of it was to prevent people from losing their apartments. So it would reduce the level of potential homelessness. We've been an active part of that program with the county, and the program's really been very successful so far. It's assisted a number of persons throughout the region, well, Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh, with rental assistance. So just wanted to make sure people knew that program is still active, still taking applications for assistance, and you can go to the county website for that program. Next. Maybe that's the last one.
Yeah, that's the last one.
So I did just want to say quickly, for the coronavirus funds, we were proud to be part of that effort to address, the immediate needs of the crisis that occurred with coronavirus. So just to give a quick example of the to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus, the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank was a big recipient of those funds, and that really helped to reduce hunger in our city and in our county. So that was I just want to give a quick example of the impact that the program can have on persons in our community. Thanks, David.
Sure thing. I'm going to give Shana from the URA a chance to load their screen. I will say one of the really fun aspects of our job is to work with 200 separate nonprofits throughout the city doing different kinds of work, serving different types of clients, and just getting to see what their kind of day-to-day is, and being even a small cog in the wheel, getting them reimbursed for things. You learn a lot about what people are capable of in the city. It's really fantastic. Up next, we're going to hear from the URA.
Yeah, thanks so much, David and Whitney, and all your colleagues at the city, and thanks to it's interesting. I've been my experience with these in the past is being in a room with folks. I can see everyone. I trust that there's lots of folks here virtually listening and watching our presentation. So thanks for participating. We're excited to present to you. Yeah, so really on behalf of the URA's board, our Deputy Director, Diamante Walker, Executive Director, Greg Flisserum, myself, Tom Link, and a few of my colleagues here at the URA. We'll talk a bit about the URA and the work we do, and specifically how we think about the use of tools like CDBG to support our work. So the URA, this is our mission. We exist to support the city of Pittsburgh's economic development goals, which designed to create city of inclusive opportunity for residents, stakeholders, and communities. You can go to the next slide, Shana. These are our sort of key priorities that we focus on when we think about all of our work. I won't read all of these, but generally speaking, you'll see that it's sort of tied back, frankly, to what Winnie was describing, with jobs, affordable housing, really trying to work to ensure really inclusive growth across our city, focusing on our neighborhoods, and thinking about how we build our workforce to meet the skills of the future and the jobs that we're creating through our work. Go to the next slide, Shana. Thanks. This is our approach. This is something we've been working on over the last years. We're really thinking about our work in terms of from a holistic approach, thinking about, it could be termed a triple bottom line or other approaches, but really thinking about, our work all the way around in terms of how we support our community. So from supporting minority and women-owned business enterprise ecosystems, ensuring that our work really creates the opportunities for our neighborhoods, keeps wealth and generation and economic opportunity local for our neighborhoods. And we think about wages and good jobs as part of our work, and thinking of those terms as we make investments in our city. You go to the next slide, Shana. When we think about sort of high level, the strategies, it's really this may not particularly be, particularly, all that surprising, but it's place-based and it's people-based, right? So we invest in place. I think, probably commonly when one thinks of the URA, we think of investing in places, right? Like buildings and bricks and mortar and structures. But in addition to that, and really ultimately what we're doing is investing in the people of our city, right? So it's whether it's a small business, whether it's a homeowner, whether it's someone moving into housing. This is really a great deal of the work that we do, and we have a tremendous amount of our programs, projects, the ways in which, frankly, we use the dollars that through this process and generously supported by the city, the mayor, the council, city council, is really to support people, and that's really at the core of our work here at the URA. And I think with that, Shana, this goes to you to talk about housing, which I know is a very popular topic these days. So Shana, I'll kick it back over to you.
Sure, thanks, Tom. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. My name is Shana Madden. I'm the Assistant Director of Housing Lending at the URA. And as I've seen a few of the questions in the chat box, Tom and Whitney have both spoke about the activities that the URA and our federal dollars that come through the capital budget allow us to invest in the city of Pittsburgh's affordable housing. And this is one of our top priorities for the URA, and it's certainly the top priority for my team. We are constantly thinking about how do we use the capital dollars, the federal dollars, our repayments that come back from loans. How can we be as efficient and as strategic as possible to ensure that all residents have access to safe and affordable housing? We're all seeing the markets change quickly in our community, and we're here trying to get ahead of that 20,000 gap, chipping away through large tax credit rental developments, through investing in current homeowners to make sure that they can stay in their home, through renovating vacant and abandoned properties to resell to affordable first-time home buyers, or an affordable home buyer in general. So I love talking about this, and I love that people are here asking questions. Let's see. So this is a glimpse at the affordable housing budget from 2021 that came from the capital budget. Our programs in this department support, as I've said, for sale developments, rental developments, and then we also work with homeowners to reinvest in their homes. We use CDBG, Home, and PAYGO when it's available to invest in these programs. You can see there's roughly about 5 million for rental housing, a little over 550,000 for sale, and around 150 for owner occupied. And this is just a glimpse of some of the sources that we use. We have, for those of you in the advocacy sphere, we do have the Housing Opportunity Fund, which also provides funds to the URA to invest in affordable housing. Those dollars come out of the city's operating budget, whereas tonight we're here to talk about the capital budget. You'll also notice that there is obviously in the spreadsheet, there's a heavier push on the rental. That's because when we were putting together 2021 capital budget, we had a backlog of sources to fund for sale. Moving forward, we're seeing a huge demand for affordable home ownership. And so that these two programs continue to kind of balance each other out in our request to the city when considering the capital budget. But as we move forward, we're focused on preserving affordable housing. We have a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing in the city that is at risk of turning market rate because of the market pressures that we're all seeing. We're going to continue to create affordable housing, create rental housing, and then we're going to expand our for sale homeownership opportunities. And we're currently researching a second deferred mortgage program that would be citywide for income eligible buyers. So as Whitney dug into some of the AMI levels that are attached to our federal fund sources, who does affordable housing help? You know, you look around your neighbors, your colleagues, the people you interact with on the street on a day-to-day. These are our neighbors, and we're investing in affordable housing for a wide variety of these professions. At the 60% AMI level, which is AMI levels are determined by your household income and your household size. So when we talk about affordable housing, we think about a 60% AMI household. And for example, that would be a two-person household making maximum $40,700 per year. Workforce, we're able to go a little bit above those limits and target what we call workforce housing. So that's your teachers, your nurses, your police officers, all of the important people that make up our city. And for example, a family with an 80% AMI level with a two-person household, that upper limit is $54,300 per year. So we're just really focused on getting our dollars out the door, investing in our communities. COVID this past year did slow down construction, increased construction costs, but it also increased the demand. So we're doing everything we can to get the dollars out the door so you can feel those impacts in those new and preserved affordable units. Jennifer?
Hi. Well, hi, my name is Jennifer Wilhelm, and I am the Director of Commercial Lending at the URA. We oversee all our small business lending there. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how the city also supports small business lending. Here is our 2021 budget allocations. We have various programs that we use to support businesses. We do both lending, traditional business loans, as well as a lot of non-lending programs that support businesses in various ways, both in their physical space and in providing technical assistance, and also in helping them to develop workforces for their business. I'm going to turn it over to Tom Link to walk through some of these slides.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, you can. Thanks, Shana. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so kind of building off of Shana's great slide. I mean, who are we helping? We help folks across our city. I mean, the vast majority of our programmatically and project level investment in our city is helping, very, very small businesses, local businesses. Really with Jennifer's leadership, our investment in minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses is outstanding. I mean, it's close to 90%, I think, of all of our dollars, especially on the lending side, are to minority and or women-owned businesses in our city. So these are who we're helping. And I would suggest, frankly, for, if you shop or use business services in our city, there's a good chance we've helped in some way, whether that's with the space that folks are occupying or with the businesses themselves. So, these are our neighbors. These are the folks here in our communities that are really the core customer for the tools that we provide. Here, the next slide, Shana. To Jennifer's point, we a core of what the URA works on in terms of small business support is really in our small business lending. We have tools that can range from roughly $5,000 to closer to $500,000 to support businesses, really in almost all form of capital need, whether it's working capital, financing equipment, facade renovations, and almost anything, frankly, related to business startup and expansion, and again, helping businesses across our city. One thing I do like to say, again, this is a public forum. Folks watch this on YouTube if you're watching it live. We mean this with all sincerity. If you have a small business and you're in Pittsburgh, or you're thinking about bringing a business to Pittsburgh or starting a business in Pittsburgh, we really do want to hear from you. We do have lots of tools that can support folks, and whether it's through this forum here, or go to our website or whatever it is, please reach out to us. We have lots of tools that can help, and certainly our loan programs and access to capital programs are a core part of that. You can go to the next slide, Shana. Thanks. In addition to individually investing in individual businesses, we also invest in ecosystem development. And one of the programs and tools that we've been proud to help support and really help incubate over the last couple of years is the Catapult Greater Pittsburgh program, which has had success incubating and accelerating small businesses in both East Liberty at Gallery on Penn and a new Catapult expansion, which just opened actually in the last few weeks here, summer 2021, Gallery on Center Avenue in the Hill District, to provide really soup to nuts, so to speak, wraparound services to accelerate small businesses, but really focused on minority and women-led businesses. In fact, I know at Gallery on Penn in East Liberty, I think all of the graduates of that program really were women of color, Black women-led businesses that went through the program there, and you're helping to launch businesses, and you're really experiencing something similar at Gallery on Center. So these types of investments are critical to our work to help businesses have really a wide range of resources available to help folks start and grow their businesses. You go to the next slide, Shana. Just talked about this, but here's some additional examples of what Catapult is working on. The culinary is the newly launched tool, really focusing on food-based businesses and food-based entrepreneurs that will run out of the Gallery on Center. And then Catapult Kids, which has really been exciting, is to help bring those services and tools, frankly, to younger people, youth who are thinking about entrepreneurship and how to think about creating a new generation, so to speak, of entrepreneurs here in Pittsburgh. You go to the next slide. I think we'll see what the next slide says. And am I turning it over to you, David, or am I still talking? So I'll talk a bit here. Yes, these are more tools that we provide, just examples of the type of work we do. Actually, Whitney, you mentioned the COVID response. One of the tools that we put together pretty quickly and we're able to get help a lot of folks was with our Get Online, Grow Online program, which again really provided support to small businesses to improve and really have excellent e-commerce presence and establish online presence. Again, of course, through with COVID, I think we all understand, in fact, by virtue of the fact that we're sitting here doing this via Zoom for the last year and a half or so, for a small business really to stay afloat in the past year or so, the ability to sell your services and goods through e-commerce and online was critically important. So having tools to support that. We've helped with sort of street Main Street business corridor activation through tools like our sidewalk sales program, where we provide monies directly to our business district partners to do creative and innovative projects and programs to drive foot traffic to their business district. And, that's our sidewalk sales program, in addition to a variety of other things, including a lot of business education. Actually, we've been, really at the forefront on in the past year or so to make sure, at some basic level, every small business, every entrepreneur in our city has at least the knowledge of the tools that are out there to support your business. You can go to the next slide. Neighborhood Initiatives Fund is a tool that, again, but for frankly this process, and again through thanks to the city council, the mayor's office, investing in this tool as a program where we provide grants directly to our community partners to, really to around projects and programs to revitalize their business districts. And so we've started this in 2019. We're actually just about to open a new round for current monies for this program. Actually a week from today, is that right? Yeah, I think it's today, June 8th. Yeah, a week from today it actually opens again, so please take a look for it. For really providing dollars directly to our community partners to make investments in their communities. What makes sense to them? I was just actually a couple of weeks ago, really excited. NIF was able to support the Argyle Cooperative in Oakland, which brings together, I think it's 25 local entrepreneurs and sort of as a customer in a single retail space, but it's 25 individual entrepreneurs and makers who are able to put their goods on display in a very sort of welcoming, exciting retail environment to sell their goods and help, again, a generation of entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. To the next slide. Workforce is new for us. I mean, one thing the URA has done, is for many, many years is create lots of jobs. One of the things we're focusing on, and we built some capacity and building some partnerships to be more proactive in connecting the jobs that we create with our workforce ecosystem and workforce delivery system, as well as partners, to ensure that at some basic level, frankly, when we invest in a community, folks in our city, folks in our neighborhoods have access to those jobs and have access to the tools and skill building resources to ensure that one can compete for the jobs that we're creating. So it's a program and a capacity that we've just built out and launching. Examples of some of the initial work that's been concluded, the First Source Center in the Hill District is really exciting. We'd like to think if there's ways to replicate that, frankly, over time in different communities. Again, working directly with a variety of partners around specific workforce building initiatives to ensure that connection. You can go to the next slide, Shayna. Thank you. Just some other examples of workforce. I think we're running long here. Yes, thank you. So finally, Avenues of Hope is a tool that I think many folks have heard about. I invite folks to go to the URA's website and read more about it. But Avenues of Hope is an initiative, again, nascent, but we're excited to launch that provides some specific focus to 7 business corridors here in the city. Really focus on historically Black business-owned business districts here in Pittsburgh, to where some of our deepest investments might be made. When we think about really thinking about the deep investments required to rebuild a main street, to rebuild a business district, and rebuild the housing around that business district, and Avenues of Hope becomes that sort of lens by which we think about those investments. You can go to the next slide, please. I've talked about this, really had a holistic approach to this, to the Avenues of Hope, thinking about housing, thinking about placemaking, thinking about job creation, and really the services supportive of a great business district and a great community. And then to the next slide, please, Shayna, thanks. And just to identify exactly what those Avenues of Hope are. So these are the 7 corridors that have been defined through Avenues of Hope as our initial work to support these sort of deeper investments to rebuild business districts. I won't read all of them, but there are 7 there across our city and really sort of quite dispersed. Thinking about Center Avenue and Larimer as sort of some of the, building off of some of the successes we're having there, and hopefully bring that sort of effort and replication across our city to the to various communities, to rebuild main streets really in these business districts. With that, I think that's the end of the URA's presentation. Yeah, and I guess we'll have questions and discussion later. But again, thanks so much for allowing us to present, and we're excited to answer any questions we can. And again, thanks to my colleagues as well, Shane and Jennifer, and I know Dave Servin's here as well to help facilitate this. So thank you very much. That's all I got. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. While Director Dash from City Planning loads their screen, I'll just say the Avenues of Hope project's been really interesting to watch develop, because it also includes some public space improvements that the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure's working through. It came from a lot of data and research from other departments. So it's been great to see a lot of different departments and authorities coming together in a really concentrated way. Director Dash, you all set?
All right, thank you. My name is Andrew Dash. I'm the director of the Department of City Planning. And, just to give a quick overview of the Department of City Planning and its role in capital projects, we are a department that is really focused on land use and building. So, really our role is to, like it says on the screen, to really, have an orderly, consistent land use across the city. To do that, there are a number of policies that we create, projects, programs. We also, through the management of the city's zoning code and our development review process, ultimately what we want to create is an equitable, thriving Pittsburgh and neighborhoods that define it. So we do that in a number of different ways. We do that through citywide policy, from things like the city's climate action plan and resilience strategy to comprehensive housing strategy and other things, which we'll talk about that. We do so at specific geography levels. So whether that is some of our neighborhood planning programs, such as the Eco Innovation District, the Oakland Plan, work to update the Greater Hill District Master Plan, to the way that we change regulations. So that can be anything as small as changing parking requirements for row house districts to facilitate better development, to completely rezoning all 35 miles of the city's riverfronts to include and update those regulations so that they include the goals that decades of riverfront planning had put into place. And so putting those things that are coming out of plans into action through regulations or through direct implementation at particular times, typically within the open space realm. So the city and capital budget dollars do go towards the city's neighborhood planning program. So we do have 4 adopted neighborhood plans across the city in the Homewood neighborhoods, the Hazelwood and the Greater Hazelwood neighborhoods, being Hazelwood and Glen Hazel, Uptown and West Oakland, and then the Manchester Chateau neighborhood plans. Those are the 4 that are complete and adopted. We are currently working with the Oakland communities and the Hill District communities to either create new plans in Oakland or to update and adopt the Greater Hill District Master Plan. We also house the city's ADA coordinators. So the Americans with Disabilities Act and compliance for that is something that is a part of the Department of City Planning. Whether that's organizing ideas through the city's city-county task force on disabilities, or whether that's through capital projects, through things that that happen within city facilities, or whether it's looking at larger transition planning, which is something that is required through the ADA for cities to develop plans to show how they are looking to become compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We also, as many other people on this call have mentioned, work on housing. So the housing needs assessment, which initially identified the 20,000 unit gap in affordable housing, was a project developed through capital budget funds through the Department of City Planning. We're actually working to update that work in 2021. That housing needs assessment was also part of the work that happened 5 years ago with the city's Affordable Housing Task Force. Recommendations of that, including the development and the creation of what we now have as the Housing Opportunity Fund, as well as the development of inclusionary zoning, which was identified through the recommendation of the Housing Task Force, and then the Department of City Planning then went and created that ordinance in coordination with local community organizations, housing advocates, and council members as well. Department of City Planning also includes our Division of Public Art and Civic Design. So as a part of that is the maintenance of monuments and public art throughout the city. So whether that is conserving and maintaining the the monuments and public art that we have throughout the city, as well as new commissions of public art. And so in 2021, for example, we have gone under contract for a series of artists for the Arts and Parks program, which is actually the largest expenditure of and commissions of new public art the city's seen in decades. And what that will be is that we will have artists working through a grant in each of our regional asset district parks, the five regional parks that we have throughout the city, working with residents to create art as additions to their parks. And so even some of these plans that were created with capital budget dollars then affect projects that either other people on this call or in other budget calls or budget meetings have put forward. So really through the plans that we create, our role is to work with residents to understand the vision for the spaces that we're planning for. So whether that is looking at a neighborhood, looking at the lens of a neighborhood through a neighborhood plan, or looking at, we had the meeting last week on open space and recreation, looking at things like a park master plan, working to develop that vision, those goals, and then the policies that need to take place to make those happen, or the designs of projects that need to take place to be able to make that happen. And then those are projects that can be passed off, to one of our other departments, or maybe projects that the department takes on itself. And so doing that, sometimes that will outline further studies, trail projects, open space projects, or the image that is on the top there is of an intersection that happened through the Eco Innovation District, the 5th and Dinwiddie intersection, where then we found strategic sites and then worked with the Urban Redevelopment Authority to create a request for proposals based on the community vision for that site, and now are in the development review process for a developer who's actually looking to build that project. And so, that can take place on the development side. It can also take place on a public improvement side. And in some cases, like I had stated around our public art and civic design division, in some cases we are taking on those projects ourselves with capital budget dollars. So you see, various public art projects. This is all using that Uptown Eco Innovation District example. These are improvements that the department made in Tustin Park in the Uptown neighborhood. And so thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Dave and the Office of Management and Budget team.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, Director Kinter from Permits, Licenses, and Inspections gets their screen loaded. I don't know if anybody was able to come last week. We got a great conversation going from City Planning talking about the park master planning process specifically and the work that's been done. Southside Park, it's happening, just wrapped up actually at Emerald View. Got to talk through how that turns into construction drawings and turns into actual implementation. Up next, a very underrated department, in my opinion. Really crucial land use function is remediating land, and we give money to POI to help with a lot of that. So Director Kinner, do you want to take over?
Thank you. So good afternoon, good evening. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. I'm Sarah Kinter. I'm the director of the Department of Permits, Licenses, and Inspections. And as you can see, it's been a long day. The mission of PLI is to ensure that the built environment in Pittsburgh is safe. And we're empowered to carry out this mission through enforcing the building, zoning, and licensing codes adopted into city code. So our mission relies on having robust permitting operations so that the construction in the city meets construction code requirements, and robust code enforcement operations to issue citations and gain compliance for structures that don't meet those minimum safety standards. And today, of course, we want to talk briefly about PLI's use of capital city dollars. As part of PLI's mission to ensure that the built environment is safe, we're responsible for demolishing unsafe structures in the city, and we rely on the capital budget to carry out that work. PLI vacant property inspectors review properties and are empowered to designate buildings as condemned if it is unfit for human occupancy. There are two ways to lift a condemnation from a structure. One is to obtain permits to repair a structure, and the other is to demolish the structure. City-funded demolition of condemned properties is reserved for structures that are in the worst condition citywide. There are almost 1,900 condemned properties located in the city of Pittsburgh. And here you can see spatially where those condemned structures are located in the city by council district. It's important to note that there are several factors that can result in condemnation of a property. Again, it means unfit for human occupancy. The structural stability of the building will vary. But we do know that condemned structures are primarily located in our communities of color. Condemned structures are an indication of a lack of investment over time, and they are primarily in the city of Pittsburgh made up by privately owned parcels. So I do want to note that the city doesn't gain ownership of a parcel once a structure is demolished if it's privately owned. The ownership does remain with the private owner, and the parcel is liened with the cost of the demolition. So given the volume of condemned structures and the need for demolition and limited resources, how do we determine what gets demolished? In June of 2020, PLI launched a new code enforcement system in One Stop PGH. And it was a really big undertaking to move our condemned properties listing from a spreadsheet to a programmatic inspection tool. And that work is still ongoing. The tool enables us to schedule inspections on a rotating clock and to adequately track condemned properties over time. In addition to the standard code enforcement process that we have where we inspect and we bring out of compliance properties to court after 3 notices of noncompliance. We adopted as part of this tool a scoring system to assess condemned structures in the city of Pittsburgh and get our arms around the problem so we can begin to appropriately anticipate the need and costs for annual demolitions. And provide other agencies with information about those structures that may be able to be put back into productive use. The scores are based on structural factors, including major or minor damage to key elements of the buildings, and additional conditions that we need to flag, including imminent danger, the structure's proximity to the cartway or likelihood to affect a right-of-way, and the proximity to occupied adjacent structures. And the score will range from 1 to 60. It's important also to note here that the structural scores are based on what the inspector can visibly see from the right-of-way. Interior elements are not generally part of the inspection checklist. We do not often have access to these private interior inspections. So we're coming up on a year of this new tool, and we've scored a little over 1,500 of those 1,900 structures with our small but mighty vacant property inspectors. And after a year of the scoring tool, you could see here the distribution of those scores. The x-axis here is the actual property score determined by the inspector's inspection, the checklist that we use. And the y-axis here is the distribution calculation based on the standard deviation and the mean or the average of the score. On average, condemned buildings have a score of 17, which indicates that they're not imminently dangerous and they are on average not ready to collapse. So there's a potential for redevelopment there. We're concerned at PLI with those properties that are scoring 31 and higher. Those are in the red to us. Those are the ones that we're worried about imminent danger. In addition to the structural scores, we're also working with our sister agency, City Planning, on launching a Engage PGH page to gather formal input from the community on requests regarding condemned structures. The launch of this page will hopefully be within the next month or so. And with Engage PGH, we want to display our data here. We want to show our work and be transparent about our scores and what we have listed as the worst building structurally. While PLI's focus is on the structural health of a building, we recognize that there are other factors that can make a condemned building a nuisance to neighbors, from pests to rodent problems, to break-ins and fires, and we want to take those into account as well and allow for additional input. We've also worked with DCP to provide a sister score to our structural score. We want to make sure that we're not demolishing structures that city planning deems significant, maybe historically or architecturally. We have a lot of condemned properties and limited demolition resources. Demolition is just one tool in the toolbox, so it's important to flag these structures early in the process that they should not be demolished. And finally, in addition, when it comes to condemned properties, in April of 2021, Mayor Peduto issued an executive order directing PLI to begin deconstruction of condemned buildings. And deconstruction is a demolition process where you take out elements of the structure in the opposite order of which they were installed. So for example, you would remove the bathroom fixtures, the cabinetry, the tiling, you would demolish the wall enclosures, get to the framing, etc., with the intention of keeping those elements to reuse. And considering the cost of construction material these days, that might actually be pretty profitable for contractors. We know that construction debris takes up a lot of landfill space, and deconstruction is an approach that can have a real positive environmental impact, and we would like to support deconstruction initiatives with capital funds in 2022. PLI has two capital budget funding streams to complete demolitions, which creates two demolition processes for condemned buildings. For emergency demolitions, PLI is usually called out on a 911 call. We have on-call staff that respond to that. From there, we determine whether the building is imminently dangerous and will cause damage or harm to life or property. And if so, we will perform a curbside bid with a pre-qualified contractor to demolish the structure and make the area safe. We treat that structure as if it is hot for asbestos. We assume that it has asbestos and perform that emergency demolition. For CDBG demolitions, we perform asbestos surveys on prospective properties we want to demolish first, and then we go through a HUD review, an environmental state review, prior to opening the bid process for demolition to the qualified contractors on contract. And so this is a much longer timeline that takes months before we're able to demolish. One of the most common questions I get, besides where's my permit, is, why were we only doing emergency demolitions in 2020? And this slide shows the use of funds for demolitions completed by PLI annually, looking back 5 years. 2020 was a really different year from others funding-wise, which affected PLI's ability to demolish structures in 2020. So as per the previous slide in Brendan's presentation earlier this evening, PAYGO funds are more liquid. It's the city's own funds, and they have less restrictions than our CDBG capital funds. From 2016 to 2019, PLI traditionally was provided more PAYGO dollars than CDBG dollars, allowing us to take more immediate actions on demolitions. In 2020, PLI received less PAYGO and received significantly more CDBG dollars. So PAYGO funds were reserved for emergencies only to adequately respond throughout the year. CDBG dollars don't become available until October each year, so PLI had to wait until the last quarter to move on properties slated for non-emergency demolition. And the approval process was a little slower due to COVID, so our demolition work was pushed back, which means the CDBG demolitions that we're actually performing now in 2021 are with 2020 dollars from last year. So moving forward, now that we're in a new funding cycle, we should have more demolitions annually without the pause that occurred. With that, here's a spatial view of the 30 emergency demolitions that have occurred in the last year. Again, these would have been triggered through a 911 call out. PLI would assess for imminent danger. We would work with the on-contract contractors or vendors to perform an emergency demolition. And here is where the 21 non-emergency demolitions have occurred with 2020 CDBG dollars, which really began happening in February of 2021. We expect to complete an additional 40 non-emergency demolitions for the remainder of the year with those 2020 dollars. And of course, we have some nice before and after pictures of some properties throughout the city of Pittsburgh. This is the fire on Carson Street, which was an emergency demolition. In fact, a lot of these photos have to do with fires that had occurred, some recent, some not, and the after pictures of the contractor's work to level out the land and cover it, seed and cover it. We just quickly go through those. And that is the end for me. So at this time, I will go ahead and kick it back over to Dave Hutchinson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We always kind of talk internally that unfortunately demolition and remediation kind of suffers from the paving problem, where it's a really crucial city function and a huge part of the capital budget, but because it feels a little bit anonymous because you don't necessarily know what the workload's going to be next year, it's budget dependent, that it suffers a little bit from council members moving money around because it doesn't feel like it's coming out of any specific neighborhood when it's in a big bucket like that. But it's definitely important work that we fully support. So we've moved on to the fun part, the question and answer session. We've already got some great questions in the chat. Again, you can check out the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can type in an answer there if you'd like. We're just going to go through some that haven't been answered yet. So Anonymous asked, has there been any discussion about closing the 20,000 unit affordability gap, 30% below? We talked through some of the things happening with inclusionary zoning. Related to that is a couple questions from Bob Damewood. Hello, Bob. Good to see you. First was, has there been any discussion about additional capital funding for affordable housing production for households with extremely low incomes? IZ is great and it needs to be expanded, but it's only one tool in the toolbox. And a related question was, any idea how many net new units per year are affordable to households at or below 30% AMI? So I don't know if Shayna, if you want to answer with some details on kind of what the Housing Opportunity Fund is, what they've been doing the past couple of years. So as of 2 years ago, I think was the first time we did the Housing Opportunity Fund. It's $10 million in PAYGO funds that get transferred from the city budget each year to the Housing Opportunity Fund that is has its own kind of community-led board, and they have a few different efforts going on each year. So Shayna, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Sure, thanks, David. Yeah, so the mayor's office kicked off an initiative called the Affordable Housing Task Force back in 2015, 2016, I believe, which produced a number of reports, a number of recommendations to the city, which also produced the Housing Opportunity Fund, which does produce $10 million per year to support affordable housing. Through the Affordable Housing Fund, again, we're supporting development through our for sale and our RGP programs. We also have a number of consumer programs. We have HAP, which invests in homeowners to do renovations. We also have HAPPY, which is homeowners to do renovations for accessibility needs. We have been dispersing a significant amount of money in our HSP program, which is eviction prevention. So rental and mortgage support during COVID there's been a huge demand. We also have rolled out a recent program for legal aid support for homeowners, for properties that might be caught up in with title issues, or if there's legal support needed in any way related to housing initiative. So in the production of affordable units, our programs in the Housing Opportunity Fund inspire hitting lower AMI levels. So the more AMI units, more units that hit 30% AMI or less, developers are going to receive a larger amount of gap funding per unit. So we are trying to inspire and motivate developers to really target those lower income levels. We also are more and more partnering with the Housing Authority here in Pittsburgh to ensure that some of our projects have project-based vouchers to also target those lower income units. So we're really trying to just bring in as many resources, as many partners, so we can expand our impact, because we recognize that 20,000 unit gap is huge, and it's not going to happen overnight, but we need all resources on the table so we can spread the money as far as we can. What other questions were there? There were a lot. in this one.
That hits on a lot of them. In terms of capital, yeah, capital dollars for new housing construction, I always had, I'm a few years behind, in my mind that it was like $250,000 per unit. Has that stayed similar to that, or has it gone up with some of the commodity issues we've seen with steel and other projects?
Sure, yeah, I would say baseline new construction development for a home is starting at $300,000. But we are seeing just in the last month, construction costs are exploding. And we're trying to, in the moment, address that immediate need. We are starting to incorporate more and more modular housing, which does bring down the construction costs a little bit. And hopefully learn and work with our partner agencies to figure out how to navigate permitting, or just what is the best, how to incorporate this new style of housing into our communities and to help fill that void of the gap in the units. So we're learning as we go, but we see this as a possible path for bringing down the construction costs to create more affordable homeownership. David,
Yeah.
so do you have anything to say on the topic? This is our director of development services here.
Thank you, Shayna. Yeah, I was just going to say that in terms of numbers, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, and Bob, I'd be happy to try and work on getting those numbers to you that are a little more precise. But usually we use low-income housing tax credits. It's the largest tool that we have to be able to create affordable rental opportunities. And by doing rental opportunities, we can do things more at scale. So trying to chip away at that deficit as fast as we can. So there's two parts to low-income housing tax credits. One of them is just more a better tool, let's say, but it's very hard to get, and that's the 9% low-income housing tax credits. I think we got almost a record number last year of around 8 projects that were at least earmarked or won awards. So usually those are 50 or so units in total, and usually those are almost all affordable at 80% AMI or under, and typically average out to around 60%. So I'm not sure how many 30% or under units are in that, but typically a good chunk of those, so that should be around 400 or so units that are being delivered. And so a good chunk of those, maybe 100 or so, that will be at those lower limits. When you're using the 4% low-income housing tax credits, it's a significant challenge to bridge the funding gap. So the 9% are much more lucrative, but very hard to get. And the 4% are more available, but leave us big gaps. Even one project of 50 apartments could have a $4 million gap. So when we only have $10 million to spread out about through all of the different Housing Opportunity Fund line items, whether it's for sale housing or rental housing or helping homeowners stay in their houses, we don't want to just use all of that on just one project. So we have to be as strategic as we can and spread it out to as many neighborhoods as we can to reach as many people, especially at those lower income levels.
Yeah, the URA does a lot of leveraging of different fund sources to make some of those capital projects happen. It's always impressive and complicated whenever I see them put together those deals. So related to this, we had an earlier question that Director Dash answered a little bit from Michelle. What stats do you have that support an average 2-person household making $54,000 and under AMI benefits, average Pittsburgh homeowners? Those numbers, so AMI stands for Area Median Income. Whitney or Brendan, if you have any comments on the methodology there, you're welcome to join in. But AMI is kind of our income verification standards that are given to us by HUD. So overall for the program, we need to make sure that we're servicing a certain percentage of clients who are below 80% of the median income. So the median income is probably, in the 60,000s. That's the average, that's the middle for Pittsburgh incomes. And so a lot of the HUD funds are directed to people that are definitely below that. And even sometimes within that pool, they want to see certain programs targeting 80% of that average income, or sometimes like Bob's example, 30%. So people experiencing extreme poverty. Whitney, I don't know if you had any more comments on AMI.
No, I mean, you put it succinctly, that's correct. I mean, it's we're basically handed those numbers from HUD annually, and those are used as guides for programs, right? So, so while the numbers at times look fairly arbitrary, they're not. I mean, they're a composite, based on poverty rates and average incomes. I mean, they put this together and throw it out to us, and communities throughout the country receive CDBG funds to jurisdictions such as the city of Pittsburgh. So, yeah, so that's where those numbers come from, and they come out annually. But the other tool that, in terms of looking at affordability, the National Low Income Housing Coalition has a website, and you can look at cost burden, right? So there are numbers that are produced through that website that show persons, by number of persons in the household. So, if you make X amount, you can afford X type of unit, pay X amount of rent. And inevitably it shows that, most areas of the country, most people are not making enough money to afford a, 2-bedroom rental unit. So anyway, yeah, there's an affordability gap.
I'll just head over these comments on the area median income calculation. The HUD does have publicly available on their site a pretty detailed methodology for how those figures are arrived at.
Yeah, they spent some time crunching the numbers for sure. We had a question from Anonymous. Can you tell us the plan to spend the ARP funds in detail? I don't know it yet. I know that's a program that's kind of happening right now. I know there's a lot of council discussions. We're actually lucky to be joined tonight by the council budget office. Bill or Mike, I don't know if you had any comments on kind of council's perspective with that. I will say any decisions, absolutely any decisions with those funds will be made public. It'll go through the same budget process, not exactly the same, but same legislative process that our budget goes through. So any intended uses for those funds would be available for public comment. There'd be the period of time where you can read and submit comments to your council office if you wanted to, but just like the capital budget itself, those funds would need to be budgeted through a public process. Good to see Nina back in the meeting. Talking about Engage PGH, we're going to get to a demonstration of that in just a little bit. Also demolition, thank you for that comment. Oh, what about inflation? That's a good point. We see some trends that are happening as Brendan showed, where we may be getting kind of a static amount of, absolute dollar amount for our HUD funds, but over time it's been eroded by inflation. I'm sure they're calculating the, well, I guess it would be built into the average median income. I think it's just the reported data. So I don't know if they take into account any kind of like consumer price index information for that sort of stuff. I think it's just the straight income.
They actually do it just for inflation. They include CPI, which is not one of the main measures of inflation.
Excellent, good to know. Okay, I just want to do one more last call. Are there any other questions, comments we can answer? And then I'm going to wrap up with a few more tools that are available to you. Like we said, this is really just kind of the kickoff for the capital budget season. We just kind of started in April with the mayor's priorities, but also we have some events going on like these 3 meetings. I'm going to show the Engage PGH page. So I can show off our newest tool, courtesy of city planning. Did a great job with this. The Office of Community Affairs, both represented on this call, did an excellent job with this. It's become a great one-stop shop for residents to be able to figure out what's going on in the city. So if you go, I don't know how to hide this part. So the website is engage.pittsburghpa.gov. Down below, you can see a bunch of different open projects that you can check out. Each project is unique, but a lot of them have kind of similar functions within the Engage pages themselves. On the right-hand side, there's usually a great calendar of events that are happening. So coming up tomorrow, I hope you all are going to tune in to the operating budget forum. So similar to the capital budget, the operating budget also has a public meeting. So they're going to be talking through all of the stuff we didn't talk about tonight. That's going to be happening tomorrow. So be sure to sign up for that one. There's also some other references and links to previous year's meetings, there's a really great balancing act budget simulator you can use there. It's kind of like a miniature version of our job. You get to start with a 2021 budget and make additions and subtractions and submit a budget to us. So you can provide comments on individual things you want to see changed, or we can just look at the numbers that you used to get a sense of what your priorities are. And then down below is really, really crucially important. It's the survey. For the capital budget, we really rely on input from residents to drive project ideas. So we tried to make this as simple as possible. The first one is almost like a 311. If you have a specific set of stairs you want to see upgraded, if you want to see lights at a ball field, you can put that information directly into here, including the location. There's also a really cool map function at the bottom if you want to spot it that way. You can do multiple projects this way. There's space for 3 on this one, but you can come back and submit another one if you've got more ideas. In the second section, we also ask just kind of generally citywide, what types of projects do you want to see more investment in? It doesn't have to be in a specific location. And then at the end, we ask your opinion on the mayor's priorities for 2022. This helps us create a good feedback loop to the administration so they understand how their ideas are kind of matching up with priorities for community members. Sorry, hold on one second. So what do we do with the information when it comes back through the survey? Our office actually goes through each single line and we review it for a few different pieces of information. First of all, when we get it back, we try to tag any relevant projects. So in this case, we had a request for Green Boulevard plan, which you heard about a little bit earlier. That could be either a complete streets project or a trail development project. The department for both of those projects is the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And that project could span 2 different council districts. It could be in District 6, starting in the Strip District downtown area, all the way up to District 7 here in Lawrenceville. What we do then is we share all of these with the council offices, the project managers, and the department leadership for all the departments that do capital budget projects. So if I'm Director Ricks from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, I can take this spreadsheet that's got 500 different lines on it of project ideas and just sort for my department, see what's in there, and then distribute these for project managers to research further. Maybe we can do some costing. Maybe they need to do a traffic study to see if some new improvements need to be made to lights and things like that. We've seen examples. This is a great one of project ideas coming directly from citizens and neighbors and ending up in the capital budget. It's always a really nice feedback process. Additionally, each year we try to do a review of what we put in the budget versus what people asked for. So on the left-hand side, this is the 2021 capital budget distributed across these 6 kind of project buckets, these different project types here, color-coded, and that's just by the total dollar amount budgeted. We like to compare that to the survey responses we got last year when we were in this process. And for those, we just kind of check out the number of survey responses for the same project buckets. As you can see, they match up generally pretty well. All of the engineering and construction projects, DPW, Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, those are very popular. The smaller, more admin things like vehicles and equipment, BE, administration, subaward stuff, not as exciting, so understandably not as much a part of the public conversation. Close out, I just want to remind you again, there's a ton of tools available to interact with the capital budget. In addition to the Engage website, you can also go to 311, you can tweet at them or call them if you have any specific immediate concerns about capital infrastructure in your neighborhood. You can email us at cip@pittsburghpa.gov. Please reach out to your council office. They're the ones who end up passing the budget in the end. So the month of December is kind of crunch time for them. That's when they have their department meetings with some of the same directors you're seeing on tonight's call. That's a great opportunity for you to reach out to them and let them know not only the things that you might be disappointed in, but the projects you really want to support. I would love to see people come out for projects they're in support of. It's a great way to advocate for your neighborhood in a way that doesn't happen as often as it should. And please, whatever you can do, please share the survey. It's really important for your voice to be heard. Share it on social media, share it to your neighborhood groups. It only takes 5 or 10 minutes to complete. And then we have a great set of data that we can use to form the 2022 capital budget. I want to say thank you to the City Channel. I want to say thank you to our interpreters, Jim and Heather. Thanks to the Office of Community Affairs. Thank you to URA, Commission on Human Relations, City Planning, permits, licenses, and inspections. Whitney with our team. Am I forgetting anybody? I think I got everybody. Thank you, all of you who are watching. I know there's lots of fun things to do on a summer night in June in Pittsburgh, and I appreciate you taking the time. Again, please feel free to share the Engage PGH website as wide as you can. We want to get as many surveys as possible. With that, I'm going to wish everybody a good night.